I'm going to take Tommy's call. Tommy from
Yeah.
Alabama. That's not Poland, not California, Alabama. Sorry about that. He, him. What do you think about the 7AC sequence? Does it demonstrate design? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Tommy. Phoebe and I talked about this before the show. We don't know anything about the 7AC sequence. So we're going to put up a clock right there, and we're going to ask you to please explain it to us like we are 5 years old. And maybe the audience will enjoy that as well.
Well, hey, thanks for having me on. And I think it was probably something that was lost in the call screening translation. It's the Fibonacci number, Fibonacci number is what I'm referring to.
Fibonacci, yes.
Is that something you're familiar with?
You got the clock up. Explain it to us.
Yeah. Give it to the audience. I know a bit about it. I've seen it. I've seen it referenced. But yeah, explain it.
Basically, it's in mathematics, it is a sequence of numbers where each number is the sum of the two preceding ones. So your sequence would go like 0, 1, and you would add those two numbers together and you would get 1, and then you add 1 and 1 together and you get 2, and then 2 plus 3 is 5. It's an ongoing sequence, and it comes out to a ratio that you wind up seeing represented proportionally throughout nature. You'll see it in the divisions of tones in music. You'll see it in the expansion, and you're talking about the bones of the hand, the phalanx bones to the carpal bones, and the ratio of the size of those expanding as you go back. You'll see it become what generates the petals and the proportionality of that on various flowers, pine cones, all these kinds of things. And this was something that hit me just kind of out of left field a week ago. I was an evangelical for 45 years. I became an atheist 2 years ago, and this threw me for a loop when I saw this last week. I was like, I don't know what this means.
So I feel like I should be channeling my inner Katie Montgomery here, because she's the mathematician around these parts. Why do you think that this mathematical sequence, I'm aware of this mathematical sequence, how do you think that this is more than just a coincidence? How do you think that it's just that what we have looked at and we have found something that mathematically goes through the motions and goes through the notions, and we have been able to apply it to science as we have? Because mathematical science being applied to other sciences is fairly standard and fairly normal. How do you believe, or how have you come to the conclusion that it's beyond what is just mathematical evolution and mathematical applications to evolutionary science to actually demonstrate a design? Sell that one to me.
Yeah, and it's not something I feel I need to sell. I'm not convinced of it myself. I guess what I'm saying is it may just be something that's just naturally occurring, and it is what it is, and based in all of these different domains that we see it observed throughout, nature, it just may be what's needed to generate what we see, and I get that. I'm fine with that. I guess I do see creationists and theists say this argues maybe not for a designer, but it looks kind of like a tool that the designer might use, I guess is. And I haven't seen a good rebuttal to that online, and trying to look at, what would the atheist response be to, the Fibonacci sequence being evidence for a divine type of a thing.
I got you, Tommy. I think it's clear. I think it's clear that mathematical relationships are evidence that things have relation to each other. I'm not a mathematician, neither is Phoebe, but to suggest that it's evidence for a designer or a tool that a designer would use, I think that presupposes that you can prove that such a designer exists, and the fact that
I totally agree with that.
I'm not convinced, because the designer that anyone would be talking about would be something that would be so profoundly outside of anything observable, testable, and provable that you're out of the frying pan and into the fire. So if such a designer exists, then everything would be a tool that designer could use, but you'd still be at the problem of having to prove that such a designer exists, and you'd have to design tests. And what's amazingly convenient is that whenever one says, well, go ahead and prove that your designer, that your creator, that your first mover exists. Well, you can't do that with God. It's a special pleading argument,
Right.
and so it doesn't really get
Yeah.
us anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it. But as far as what does the Fibonacci sequence signify to me as a non-believer? Gee whiz, isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? Look at how there's
Yeah.
so many different ways that this can manifest in nature. The way matter
That's what's wild
interacts
about
with
it, because
Yeah,
I'll you'll hear theists, you talk about the design that's in DNA, and you're like, no, that's just what chemicals do, or you'll see, well, you have these different constants that we see in nature and the fine-tuning arguments that they throw out from that. They're kind of like one-trick pony things, but this is everywhere in all kinds of things, from science to mathematics to golden ratio in building and art and even in our own. Yeah, it was an interesting wrinkle to the whack-a-mole that I try to do with putting down things that would try to suppose a theist world construct again. But
are you, Tommy? I want to ask: are you aware of the Grand Unified Theory?
Of what theory?
The Grand Unified Theory. You're aware of the concept of the Grand Unified Theory and the Einsteinian theory of everything?
Yes and no. Not from an expert level at all, but I'm familiar with it as a concept.
So, the Grand Unified Theory is trying to take all of the disparate theories, mainly in theoretical physics, and pushing them all into one big theory. So if that was to occur and it could be applied, do you, as an atheist, see that as an argument being used, or is that something that maybe would convince you of it demonstrating a design? Or is that just the natural evolution of science, and then it moves on?
My conclusion would probably be, well, that's just how the universe works. It doesn't mean that there's somebody working it. And that may be all that this is. But because it crossed so many different domains, it was a little bit more interesting to me than just, one thing that's put out there as a the DNA design thing, argument or whatever.
Sure. Tommy, I think I agree with you. It's interesting. It's neat, but
that's about all it
is. That's about it. Unless you have enough evidence, enough support for anything other than that, anything beyond that, like, wow, look at how neat the universe is. This is exactly what I always I sort of gripe about. It grinds my gears. Is that the world is filled with so many amazing, beautiful, intricate little details that you can spend an entire lifetime exploring. You can get advanced degrees. You can get tenure and spend your entire tenure as a professor working on some little fragment of a newt of a gnat, and no one's ever heard of before, and your life will be enriched with detail on that. And then human beings who aren't willing to put in the work so frequently would rather imagine that there is a ghost that inhabits everything, that makes everything, that bends matter and the universe toward a moral arc that tells us who we can bang and who we cannot bang. I know that's oversimplifying it, but Tommy, thank you so much for calling.
Hey,
do appreciate you.
Y'all have a good one.